You, of course, join us as we're expecting President Biden to travel to Israel, be there on the ground tomorrow. And yet, as we are awaiting his actual arrival there, the narrative in the region is changing very rapidly in light of a strike on a hospital in Gaza, an explosion, it seems, that has killed hundreds of Palestinians. There's been blame placed on both sides at the other. And yet I just wonder how that changes the optics for him as he gets there to the ground.
Well, Kailey, everything has changed. 2 hours ago, one could make the argument that the president was going with a significant amount of political and moral capital for having taken a very unambiguous stand on the question of terrorism and Israel's right to defend itself. In preparing for this trip now, you have the backdrop of a horrific event at the hospital in Gaza, a hospital I know well from having been there years ago. And, the trading of blame doesn't change the fact that hundreds of people have been killed, and the president will be landing in the midst of an escalation in the humanitarian disaster, which does change the narrative. So it's going to be a much more challenging trip than even it was before this event.
Well, so what would be your advice to the president here when it comes to messaging? This sounds, to your point, like this is a different trip than it even was this morning. When he touches down tomorrow, what is his message to the world?
Well, I assume they'll be scrambling on the plane to develop a message in which he can reassure the Israeli public that we support them, that we stand with them, we understand the trauma that they faced. But he also needs to send a message to the Palestinians and the Arab world that we understand their trauma and that we are talking to Israel about dealing with its response to the Hamas terrorism in a manner that will try to minimize civilian casualties. It's a very hard line to hold on to, and the president's going to have to do a real job in convincing both sides that he understands their respective narratives, their respective traumas, and is going to work to try to deal with the situation not just tomorrow, but the day after as well.
Ambassador, I'm going to ask you to bear with us as we deal with some breaking news just crossing the wire here. We understand via reporting from Al Jazeera that Jordan has now canceled a planned summit with Biden and other Arab leaders. This is, of course, where the president was set to travel after visiting Israel tomorrow. According to Al Jazeera, Egypt and Palestinian leaders have agreed on canceling the summit. What does that signal to you, Ambassador, that other players in the region are deciding not to meet with the president when he is physically there?
Well, it's a very negative signal. I think the president was hoping to bring Arab support for American diplomacy, which has been quite active over the last week, and to be able to talk directly to President Mahmoud Abbas of the Palestinian Authority about what we intend to do to ensure that Palestinian interests are maintained. He won't have that opportunity now. The whole trip, if it goes forward, will focus entirely on Israel. And as a political matter at home, that's probably okay, but it doesn't sit well in the region, and that makes the president's agenda much, much more challenging.
Well, Air Force One has not left the ground yet, Mr. Ambassador. Should Joe Biden be reconsidering this trip?
You know, it's a tough call. It will send a bad message in Israel if he cancels, but it will be a realistic message in understanding that events on the ground do change presidential calculations. Look, it's very hard to imagine a president going into a war zone anyway, where American forces are not directly involved. So I think people would understand if, in light of today's activities, today's events, the president decided to postpone, let's not say cancel. I'm sure he would get on the phone immediately with the prime minister in Israel and with Arab leaders, but I think it would be understood that we may need some time to step back and take a deep breath before deciding on next steps.
Okay, so as we think about what those next steps may be, Ambassador, we of course know that the next step, at least here in Washington, is the Senate tomorrow will be considering the nomination of Jack Lew for a job you used to have, Ambassador to Israel. That confirmation hearing will begin tomorrow, as currently no one actually is in that post. How consequential and important is it that that happens at this time that there actually is an acting ambassador to Israel? And what would your message be to senators who are considering that at the moment?
Well, it's absolutely essential. We have a good charge d'affaires, Stephanie Hallett, who's acting on the ground, but there is no real substitute for an empowered ambassador. And Jack Lew is an enlightened choice. He's a man of great integrity, experience. I think he's going to do a phenomenal job. And that's what we need on the ground right now. Someone who's calm, collected, has the president's support, and is able to carry out our diplomacy at the highest levels. The period ahead is going to be extremely difficult. I faced this in my tenure when we were in the midst of a Palestinian intifada, and I was able to deal with Prime Minister Sharon at that time and senior levels, and that's what we need in Israel now. We need Jack Lew as an empowered ambassador.
So what's going to happen tomorrow, in your view, Mr. Ambassador, if they're rewriting the speech en route, essentially? What should Joe Biden's posture be, once again, as he addresses audiences around the world, Israel, including here in the U.S., as we anticipate a debate over funding?
Well, he'll have two public messages and one private message. The public message will be, in the first instance, directed at the people of Israel. I've come to support you. I've come to tell you that what I've been saying over the last week, I mean it. The dispatching of our military assets, the visits of our CENTCOM commander and our Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, we are standing with you. Second public message is the Palestinian people. We know that you are suffering under the long-term occupation. We have tried over the years to help, and we will continue to do so once the dust settles here. And we are very much aware of the horror of what happened in Gaza at the hospital today. The private message to the Israeli leadership is going to be very tough to deliver. The president is going to want to know that Israel is going to moderate its activities in a manner that really does reduce Palestinian civilian casualties. Extra care, we know that Israel does care about that, but extra care in this situation. In the first instance, also focusing on the humanitarian situation on the ground right now. So it's a very full agenda, and you have this public-private bifurcation of issues, which are going to be tough to manage.